I turned 36 the night everything changed, but the unraveling had started much earlier, in moments so small they could have been ignored. I could have chalked it up to work stress or the normal fade of excitement in marriage, but I didn't, because deep down, something in the air had shifted, and it had a scent. The first time I noticed it was a Thursday. Ria came home from yoga, cheeks flushed and hair slightly damp, like she wanted to look like she had been working out but hadn't. She kissed me on the cheek, dropped her gym bag by the stairs, and headed to the kitchen without a word. I followed her. That's when it hit me, the scent. Sea salt and citrus. Not the earthy, lavender meets sweat smell of a yoga studio, and definitely not her usual patchouli oil. No, this was something distinctly masculine. Sharp, clean, with just a hint of spice. I knew that scent. I'd smelled it before on long drives down the coast, on weekends when we'd all escape the city. Poker nights. Bachelor parties. Even that one beach weekend we took with the crew after college. Back when loyalty meant something. It was Troy's cologne. Troy, my best friend for 12 years. I didn't say anything that night. Just walked up behind her, wrapped my arms around her waist, and kissed her neck. She stiffened, just slightly, then leaned into me like everything was fine. I told her dinner would be ready in 10, and she hummed something noncommittal. But my chest felt tight. I knew. The next morning, I woke up before her and stared at the ceiling for nearly an hour. We'd been married for 8 years. Ria was the kind of woman who made strangers turn twice, not because she was flashy, but because she had presence. She walked into a room like it owed her something and usually got it. And me? I was steady. I built things, legal frameworks, business deals, our life. I made stability look easy, but something was off now. Conversations were shorter. She laughed at her phone a little too often and turned the screen away. She canceled dinner plans more frequently. Malia had a crisis, she'd say. Or, Joelle's going through a breakup again. But the stories were getting recycled. And her eyes, they didn't linger on me the way they used to. They flickered, darted, like I was a mirror reflecting something she didn't want to see. Still, I said nothing. I observed, collected, logged. I became a quiet student of her distance. The night she came home too late, the day she left too early, the way her perfume changed, the way she always wore the same black leggings on Thursdays but came home smelling like a man who never stepped foot in a yoga class. And then there was Troy. He still texted me like everything was cool. Memes. Sports clips. Random, yo, you see this? Messages. He invited me out for drinks once or twice, but I declined. Not because I was busy. Because I couldn't stomach sitting across from him, watching his mouth lie while his cologne told the truth. I replayed a conversation in my head, one from months ago. We were at a rooftop bar, the three of us. Ria had gone inside to grab a blanket. Drew, my younger brother, leaned in close and said, "Man, Troy and Ria really click, don't they?" He laughed, took a sip of his drink, and shrugged like it was nothing. At the time, I laughed too. But that moment stayed with me like a splinter just beneath the skin. I started driving different routes home from work, parking a few blocks away and walking in, just to see if I caught anything I wasn't meant to. Once, I spotted Troy's Audi pulling out of our street at 8:43 p.m. on a Tuesday. Ria texted 10 minutes later, running late, had to stop at the store. No groceries came through the door that night. Just her, and that cologne again. I tried to confront it once, subtly. I asked how yoga was. She replied too quickly. Sweaty. My core is killing me. But there was no sweat on her skin. Just bronzer, perfectly blended. Her clothes were too crisp. Didn't smell like eucalyptus in there, I said casually. She smiled, slow and lazy, like I was amusing. You're so observant, babe. Then she kissed me on the forehead and disappeared upstairs. That night, I lay in bed beside her, eyes open in the dark. She fell asleep quickly. I listened to her breathing shift into that slow rhythm that only comes with deep rest. And then, like a gift wrapped in cruelty, she spoke. Not to me, but to him. Troy, she whispered. Just his name. Once. Then again, softer. My chest felt like it was caving in. I closed my eyes, turned my face to the wall, and smiled. Not because I was okay, but because something clicked. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was confirmation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was betrayed. But here's the thing about betrayal, it burns, yes. But it also clarifies. It distills your vision down to one pure thread of truth. I didn't rage. I didn't sob. I planned. I began mentally rearranging the pieces of my life like a chessboard. I started researching private investigators. Quiet ones. The kind who didn't ask questions about motives, only results. I ordered a digital recorder online, small enough to slip under our bed. I started journaling, keeping detailed records of every excuse she made, every lie that tasted too sweet to swallow. From the outside, nothing changed. I still kissed her goodnight, still made her coffee on weekends, still played the role. But inside, I was building something brick by careful brick. Not revenge. Not yet. Just clarity. And on the night I turned 36, while she toasted to more life, more love, more laughter, I raised my glass and clinked it against hers. I didn't say a word, but I was ready, because something was in the air. And it wasn't love. It was war. It wasn't just the affair. That would have been devastating on its own, sure, but what broke me more was the awareness that I was the last to know. It was the silence that surrounded me while everyone else spoke in code, in jokes, in sideways glances and smug little smiles. My world didn't collapse in a single moment. It crumbled in increments, each one small enough to dismiss. Until they weren't. I started noticing how Ria's friends spoke to her when I was around. They were careful with their words, like they were editing in real time. Malia once said, "So, are you too still doing that Wednesday thing?" And Ria gave her this sharp look before changing the subject. I let it go in the moment, but later that night, I asked, "What Wednesday thing?" She blinked too fast. "Pilates. I thought I told you." She hadn't. We both knew she hadn't. Then there was her sister, Joelle. She'd always had a mouth on her, the kind of woman who said things with a giggle so you couldn't call it cruel. At dinner one night, she leaned in and said, "You know, Ria's lucky. Most husbands would be way more jealous about all the attention she gets." I smiled. Why would I be jealous? She smirked, sipping her wine. "Exactly. You're one of the good ones. Mature. That word again. Mature." It started showing up more and more, tossed around like confetti, used to explain away things that didn't sit right in my gut. Apparently, being a good husband now meant being passive, being silent, being willing to share my wife's affection like a buffet plate. But I wasn't stupid, and I wasn't naive. I started keeping notes. First on my phone, then on paper. It felt safer that way, less traceable. I logged everything: times, locations, excuses. I tracked the days Ria claimed she had work functions that mysteriously overlapped with Troy's calendar. And not the friend group kind of overlaps. These were intimate, deliberate overlaps. The kind that sounded plausible unless you looked close. And I was looking close now. I became obsessed with the details. Ria's wardrobe shifts. The new lingerie she never wore for me. The spa receipts for treatment she said she'd won in a raffle. She was getting bolder, or maybe just lazier. I couldn't tell which was worse. One night, as she lay beside me in bed, she started talking in her sleep again. It had always been a quirk of hers. Early in our marriage, it was charming. She'd mumble half-thoughts, giggle at dreams, sometimes mutter about office drama. But now, her sleep was a confession booth. "Troy," she whispered, her breath soft against the pillow. I froze. My hand tightened around my phone. I didn't wake her. I just listened. She said his name again, this time with something like a sigh after it. Like the end of a prayer. The next morning, I ordered a voice-activated recorder. Small. Cheap. Effective. I hid it beneath our bed, tucked deep enough that even if she cleaned, and she rarely did, it wouldn't be disturbed. I told myself I wasn't looking to catch her. I was just looking for the truth. But really, I think I wanted to hear her betray me in her own voice. And then one night, she said it again. "Troy, don't stop." My throat went dry. I sat in the dark beside her, feeling like a stranger in my own home, in my own marriage. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more. Needed it to be airtight. I wasn't going to be one of those men who gets laughed at in group chats. I would be deliberate, precise, unshakable. The next day, I played the recording back at work. Headphones in, door locked. I listened to her say his name again and again, like it was a mantra. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just clicked save and renamed the file, proof_1. That weekend, we had brunch with her friends. A casual Sunday thing they did every month. Ria insisted I come. Said it would be good for me to get out of my shell. I sat across from Malia, Joelle, and two other women whose names I didn't bother remembering. They drank mimosas and picked at avocado toast, and somewhere between laughter and gossip, Malia looked me dead in the eye and said, You know, Marcus, you should really be more open-minded. Marriage doesn't have to be so rigid. People evolve. Love evolves. I smiled politely. You mean cheating evolves? She laughed like I was joking. No. I mean, emotional flexibility. Like, if you really love someone, you let them explore. Joelle chimed in. You should be mature, Marcus. Not possessive. You're better than that. I looked at Rhea. She didn't deny it. Didn't correct them. She just smiled that tight, superior smile that told me everything I needed to know. Later that night, I brought it up gently. Asked her if she believed in what they said. If she thought marriage should be flexible. She shrugged. I think people are too uptight. Love is an ownership. And Troy? I asked softly. Is he part of your non-ownership philosophy? That's when she smirked. I'll never forget that look. Cold. Dismissive. You're so sensitive, babe. God. You always read too much into things. I didn't say another word. I just nodded and added another line to my notes. That was the turning point for me. Not her sleep-talking, not the cologne, not the whispers at brunch, but that smirk. That quiet assurance that I wouldn't do anything, that I'd take it, swallow it, that I was too mature to ever draw a line. She mistook my silence for weakness. They all did. But I was never weak. I was waiting. There comes a point when suspicion isn't enough, when watching from the shadows, keeping notes, and catching whispers in the dark no longer satisfy the kind of truth you need. That point came for me on a Tuesday, 1 week after Rhea's brunch crew all but mocked the sanctity of our marriage in broad daylight. I was tired of playing the passive husband, the so-called mature man. I didn't want whispers anymore. I wanted facts. So I called Noel. We hadn't spoken in a couple of years, not since he moved to Atlanta to open his private investigative firm. We met back in law school. He was the guy professors whispered about, sharp, quiet, calculating. A tactician in sneakers and a hoodie. He didn't play the courtroom game. He played the long one, the invisible one. And I needed someone who understood what it meant to be surgical. Marcus, he said when he answered, voice calm, like he already knew why I was calling. I need eyes, I told him. Discreet. Precise. No screw-ups. Who's the target? My wife. And my best friend. He didn't even pause. Text me their schedules, known locations, habits. Give me a week. I did better than that. I sent him the whole digital footprint I'd compiled over the past month. Her yoga schedule, her spa receipts, screenshots of text messages with cropped names, photos of Troy's car near our block on nights Rhea claimed to be working late. It was a dossier, really. A case file. I was building it long before I knew I'd need it. 7 days later, Noel delivered. He didn't send an email. He showed up in person. A black rental car pulled up to my office building on a quiet Thursday morning. He walked in with a leather satchel and an expression that said everything I needed to know before a single word was spoken. Betrayal had a scent. And now it had a body count. We sat in my office, blinds drawn. He laid everything out like an autopsy. Printouts. Flash drives. A manila folder marked with 2 names, Rhea Ellison. Troy B. Garrett. They're careless, Noel said plainly. Arrogant. You were right about the cologne. He keeps a bottle in his glove box. Same one you recognized. I leaned forward, my fingers digging into the armrest of my chair. They've met at the same hotel in the Arts District. Twice. Maybe more. I didn't want to raise suspicion, so I only caught 2 rendezvous. He pulled out photos. Black and white stills from a security camera. Rhea entering a boutique hotel on a Monday night. Troy already inside, checking in. 2 hours later, them walking out together. No disguises. No urgency. Just comfort. Ease. Familiarity. Like this wasn't the first time. Like it was theirs. I flipped through image after image. Her smile. His hand on her lower back. Her head tilted back in laughter. I remembered that laugh. She used to reserve it for me. There's more, Noel said, pulling out a smaller envelope. The hotel offers a couple's massage package. They booked under the name Hayes, probably to avoid a paper trail. But the room is registered to a corporate card linked to her event planning business. Which means she used our money, I finished for him, my voice tight. He gave a slow nod. Technically, yes. That card pulls from your joint account. I felt something crack inside me, not rage, not even heartbreak, just a kind of stillness. Like the kind you feel after a storm flattens everything, and all that's left is the debris. Any recordings? I asked. He slid over a USB. Security audio from the spa. Public hallway. You can hear them laughing, and he calls her my girl. Clear as day. I took the flash drive and stared at it like it held the weight of the world. In some ways, it did. I didn't go further, Noelle added. Didn't want to risk exposure. But this is more than enough. You want a clean case? You've got it. Financial misuse, infidelity, conspiracy. Conspiracy. He opened a second document. You own a shell company through your firm, right? The boutique storefront she's been renovating in Troy's neighborhood? The lease is under your name. But the payments? They've been siphoning funds from your side business account. He helped her set it up, and she used your credentials to do it. My jaw locked. I never signed anything. He gave a small shrug. She did. Forged it. Sloppy, but good enough for someone not looking. It was more than betrayal. It was calculated theft. Strategic deception. She hadn't just broken vows, she constructed a new life on the back of my trust. Noelle packed up the extras, leaving only one thing behind, a black envelope. Inside were the full report, high-resolution images, call logs, and financial documents. Everything I'd need. Not to confront her. Not yet. To outmaneuver her. I took that envelope home and slipped it into the bottom drawer of my study, under some old case files. I labeled the drawer with a single word, truth. Over the next few days, I reviewed it all in silence. While Rhea danced around me with her routines and her lies, I studied her like a stranger. She'd say she was going to meet Joelle, and I'd nod, already knowing she was heading for another room in the arts district. She'd kiss me on the forehead, and I'd smile, knowing where those lips had been. It stopped hurting. That was the strange part. The pain faded and was replaced with something colder. Focus. Precision. I started to sleep better. Eat better. Work more efficiently. Because I had direction now. This wasn't heartbreak. It was preparation. I didn't listen to the recording right away. I couldn't. But one night, when the house was quiet and she was out again, likely tangled in bedsheets with Troy, I plugged in the USB. Put on my headphones. Pressed play. There it was. Her laughter. His voice. You're my girl. And her response. Always, baby. He'll never know. But I did. I knew. And she was wrong. Rhea said she wanted to throw me a birthday dinner. You deserve to feel celebrated, she murmured one evening, curling against my side on the couch, as if her betrayal hadn't already turned the walls of our home into paper. I stared at the television, feigning indifference, while inside, the final piece of the puzzle slid into place. I'd love that, I told her, the corners of my mouth lifting into a smile so convincing, even I almost believed it. And that's when I started planning for real. The thing about betrayal is it changes your appetite. It sharpens your hunger, but not for revenge in the way movies show it. No loud screaming. No broken vases. No. It was quiet. Controlled. Tactical. I didn't want to fight. I wanted clarity. I wanted to show them all that I saw what they thought I'd never see, and I wanted to do it with elegance. While Rhea was coordinating guest lists and menus and floral arrangements, I was having a different kind of conversation. I called Aurelian's, one of the most refined restaurants in the city. White marble floors, ceilings like a cathedral, and the kind of service where waiters remembered your wine preference from 5 years ago. I booked their private dining room under my firm's name, using my business card, not our joint one. Rhea would never see the charge. The staff that night would not just be servers. I hired actors through an old friend in production, 2 women, 1 man, and a photographer who wasn't just taking pictures. He was recording. Full HD, crisp audio, disguised body cams. They'd all blend in perfectly, just like I needed. One of the waiters, the one closest to me throughout the night, would be Noelle himself. He shaved his beard, wore glasses, and practiced his tray-carrying posture in front of a mirror. I made a separate guest list. Not everyone I loved. No, that would have made it too personal. This wasn't about surrounding myself with support. This was about inviting every last person who helped build the lie. The enablers. The mockers. The quiet observers who said nothing while my life was being rewritten without my consent. Joelle, her sister, with the smirking eyes. Malia, with her gospel of modern marriage and condescension. Troy, the man who once called me brother and now whispered my wife's name in hotels I paid for. Even Drew, my own blood, who made that offhand comment months ago, Troy and Rhea really click, don't they? With that smug tone, I didn't clock until it was too late. They were all going to be there, smiling, toasting, thinking they'd pulled off the perfect heist. I chose the wine carefully. I knew their favorites. I made sure there would be plenty of champagne, People let their guards down when they drink, and I wanted them completely at ease. The menu was hand-selected, with Ria's favorite risotto and Troy's beloved duck confit. The cake was chocolate hazelnut mousse. Expensive, rich, celebratory. Because this wasn't just a dinner. It was the stage for the last performance they'd ever give. The day before the dinner, Ria asked me if I wanted a suit steamed. Already taken care of, I said. I'd chosen a deep navy suit, custom-tailored. Not because I wanted to impress her, but because I wanted to look like power incarnate when the floor dropped out from under them. I didn't flinch when she kissed my cheek and said, "You're going to love this night, Marcus. It's all for you." She had no idea how right she was. That morning, I went over the plan with Noelle one last time. Timing, signals, folder placement. The servers would hand out envelopes at precisely the moment I tapped my glass twice. The photographer would cue the projector just before that, claiming to play a slideshow of birthday photos. But instead of childhood memories or travel pictures, it would be something far less innocent. Audio, surveillance stills, receipts, truth. I printed 4 copies of the core dossier and sealed them in thick cream envelopes. Each one labeled in sharp, serif font, "To whom it may concern." Inside each was a tailored version of the evidence. Ria's envelope included the couple's massage booking, the boutique lease forgery, and the spa recording. Troy's featured timestamped photos, voice recognition printouts, and a copy of the bank's fraud inquiry. Joelle's and Malia's? Detailed transcripts of their text messages to Ria, the ones where they mocked me by name. Enablers weren't going to walk away unscathed. As I stepped out of the car and approached the restaurant entrance that evening, I felt something I hadn't in months: control. Not arrogance. Not malice. Just clarity. For once, I wasn't the man left in the dark. I was the architect of the room they were about to drown in. Inside, everything was perfect. The lighting dim, the candles flickering low. White linens on the table. Champagne glasses already half full. Everyone was laughing when I entered, and for a moment, it almost looked like love. Troy was standing near the back, in mid-conversation with Malia, both of them sipping from tall glasses like they belonged here. Like they owned joy. Ria turned to greet me. Her smile wide, camera ready. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "You look amazing." Her lipstick left a mark I didn't bother wiping off. Troy clapped me on the back like we hadn't been circling each other in a silent war for weeks. "Happy birthday, man. Big night, huh?" "Yeah," I said, meeting his eyes. "Bigger than you know." They took their seats around the long oak table, chattering like birds, laughter flitting through the air with the wine. Ria stood to make a toast before appetizers. "To Marcus," she said, holding her glass up high. "My husband, my partner, my forever calm in the storm." There it was again, that tone she used when she wanted to perform sincerity. I gave her a smile and a slight nod. Then I looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. One by one, I sat at the head, folding my napkin slowly, deliberately, like I had all the time in the world. Because I did, and they didn't. The room was warm with laughter, candlelight dancing off wine glasses and gold-rimmed plates. My birthday dinner was unfolding exactly the way Ria imagined, or thought she had imagined. She had no idea I had taken the script and rewritten it, down to the placement of the candles and the invisible line between truth and collapse. I looked around the table, taking in the faces of people who had spent months weaving my humiliation into something palatable. Familiar smiles, glittering eyes, champagne-stained secrets. They didn't realize the celebration was their own unmasking. Ria leaned over to top off my wine. "You okay, babe? You've been quiet." "Just soaking it all in," I said smoothly. And I meant it. I wanted to remember every detail: her hand on the bottle's neck, the shine on Troy's cufflinks, the way Malia tilted her head when she laughed like everything in the world belonged to her. They were all playing their roles, so confident, so rehearsed. It was almost impressive, the way liars could look so polished in the glow of comfort. Troy stood behind his chair, glass raised. "To Marcus," he said, grinning like a wolf in a dinner jacket. "The most level-headed, loyal guy I know. A man who always chooses grace over drama." Laughter rippled around the table. Joelle clinked her glass to his. "We could all learn from your example." And there it was again, that word, grace. As if my silence had been virtuous, not strategic. As if I had chosen to endure for the sake of evolution. They had mistaken my patience for permission. Ria sat back down beside me, her hand resting lightly on my thigh under the tablecloth. She smelled like amber and sugar, like the lie she wore so well. "You're glowing," she whispered. Ria's been so good for you, Joelle added from across the table, sipping from a crystal flute like she hadn't written me off 6 months ago. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I glanced to my right. Noel was positioned 2 spots away, disguised as a server in crisp black and white. He moved like he belonged there, like he'd trained for months, but his eyes were still his, precise, sharp, always scanning. Our signal had been established, a nod, followed by a tap of my glass. We were almost there. Dessert menus arrived. The birthday cake was wheeled in on a polished silver cart. Chocolate hazelnut mousse, Ria's favorite, not mine. I hadn't eaten a slice in 3 years. She cut the first piece herself, plating it with the poise of a hostess who thought she still controlled the room. Make a wish, she said, handing me the lighter for the candles. I lit each one slowly, methodically. One for each lie. One for each betrayal. One for every time I sat across from Troy and forced myself to act like I didn't see the guilt swimming behind his smirk. Then I closed my eyes, took a breath, and blew them out. The room applauded. I tapped my glass once. Noel caught it, gave me the smallest nod. And then I tapped it a second time. Everything shifted. Noel stepped forward, clearing his throat like it was part of the act. Mr. Marcus Ellison? The room quieted. Chairs creaked as people turned. I smiled. Right here. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and withdrew 4 envelopes, heavy cream paper sealed with black wax. You've been served. He placed one envelope in front of Ria, another in front of Troy, then one for Joelle, one for Malia. Confusion spread like a virus. Ria looked down, fingers trembling just slightly. What is this? Open it, I said softly, taking a sip of wine. She broke the seal. Her eyes scanned the first page. Her expression didn't crumble, it imploded. Color drained from her face. Her fingers shook. Inside her envelope was the receipt from the Arts District Hotel, the reservation for the couple's massage under the alias, Hayes, photos of her and Troy wrapped in towels, time-stamped and sharp. The second half contained a copy of the divorce petition, grounds, adultery, financial fraud, emotional abandonment. All documented. Troy ripped his envelope open like he was sure it would be a joke, but his face shifted fast. From amusement to disbelief to barely concealed panic. He dropped the papers like they burned his hands. Joelle was already whispering to Malia, who hadn't opened hers yet. Play it, I said to the photographer. He nodded, stepping behind the faux cake display and tapping a button on a sleek projector. The lights dimmed. The screen hummed to life. Footage played. Hotel hallway. Ria and Troy laughing. Her whispering, he'll never know. Then audio from the spa. My girl, he said. Her response, always. The air left the room. Joelle stood, knocking over her glass. This is cruel, Marcus. Malia tried to stand, but the server actor blocked her path gently with the dessert cart. Where are you going? He asked, sweet as poison. I remained seated, calm, still. To honesty, I said, raising my glass again. The kind no one at this table thought I deserved. Ria's voice cracked. Marcus, please. No, I said, setting my glass down. You can cry in court. Maybe the judge will care. I turned to Troy. He couldn't meet my eyes. His shoulders had slumped like a man already lost. 12 years, huh? I said. 12 years of pretending you were my brother. 12 years of poker nights, of Sunday barbecues, of being my best man. He didn't speak. I guess you were always practicing for the real thing, taking what was mine. He tried to reach across the table. Let's talk. I laughed. Talk? We're past talking. We're in the evidence phase now. I looked at Ria. There's one more thing. I reached into my coat and pulled out a red folder. Thicker than the envelopes. I placed it in front of her with care. This one's from the bank. Her fingers hovered above it like she already knew what was inside. You remember the boutique? I asked. The one you told me was funded through a silent investor? Turns out, that investor was me. You forged my signature. Used my business line of credit. Troy helped you. Joelle's hand flew to her mouth. Malia started whispering again, but no one was listening to them anymore. Ria looked at the folder, then up at me, her voice barely a whisper. Why would you do this? Because, I said, pushing my chair back and standing, you thought I wouldn't. And now, they knew better. The silence after the footage played was absolute. Like the breath had been knocked out of the entire room. The candles flickered, soft and absurdly romantic, casting warm light over a table full of people who now looked like ghosts. No one touched the cake. The only thing that moved was the image still frozen on the projector screen. Rhea in Troy's arms, blurry but undeniable, time-stamped in red. And then, right on cue, Malia broke the silence. "This is cruel, Marcus," she said, standing slowly, like she was talking down a man with a weapon. "You didn't have to do it like this." Joelle nodded, looking around like she expected support. "Seriously, Marcus, this is humiliating. You're better than this." That's when it happened. The phrase, the one that had been tossed at me like a leash, over and over again. Malia leaned forward and said it, voice low and controlled like she thought she was being reasonable. "Be mature, Marcus." I let it hang there. Let the ridiculous weight of it settle into the folds of my suit. Be mature. The words were spoken as if maturity meant swallowing betrayal and pretending it tasted sweet. As if letting people tear through your life and smiling politely through it all was a badge of honor. I chuckled. Not because it was funny, but because it was so expected. So on brand for a group of people who'd mistaken my silence for surrender. Mature, I repeated slowly. That's a good word. I swirled the last bit of wine in my glass and looked at Malia. "Tell me something, Malia. What's your definition of maturity? Is it staying silent while my wife screws my best friend? Or is it footing the bill for a boutique I never agreed to fund?" Her jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. Rhea's eyes were glossy now, but she hadn't cried yet. Not fully. She kept blinking like she was trying to delay the flood. She looked like she wanted to speak, but for once, she was speechless. Maybe because she could finally feel the weight of the trap she danced into so confidently. Troy didn't say a word. He just sat there, his knuckles white around the base of his wine glass. He looked smaller now. Less like the charming best friend everyone loved and more like the coward I always suspected he was. Noel, still in his waiter attire, stood quietly by the corner, no longer serving, just observing. He didn't have to move. His job was done. The evidence was delivered. The truth had been televised. Now the room had to live in it. I stood, pushing my chair back gently, slowly. No theatrics. No raised voice. Just gravity. "You all thought I was asleep," I said, scanning the faces around the table. "You built this little world inside my life and thought I'd never see the cracks. You thought I was too trusting, too calm, what was the word? Mature." Joelle scoffed. "You're acting like this is justice. It's just revenge." "Justice and revenge aren't always that different," I said. "Especially when the people who wronged you don't even admit they've done anything wrong." Rhea stood then. Not quickly, but carefully, like she thought she could regain some control by being composed. "Marcus," she said softly, like we were still in our living room and not standing on the edge of something permanent. "This doesn't have to be a war." I tilted my head. "You already started one." "I made mistakes," she said, voice trembling. "But we don't need to destroy everything over it. We can talk. Privately. Work through this like adults." "Like adults." I repeated. "You mean lie in whispers? Call it evolving? Sleep with someone behind my back and mock me with your friends over Eggs Benedict?" Troy finally spoke then, his voice low and full of that same artificial sincerity he'd used for years. "Marcus, man. This wasn't supposed to happen like this." I laughed then. Really laughed. "You mean you didn't expect to get caught?" He opened his mouth to defend himself, but I raised a hand and stopped him. "No, you don't get to speak anymore. You forfeited that right the moment you stepped into my home with that same cologne I bought you for your birthday and acted like nothing had changed." The room was still, heavy. Then I turned to Drew. "My own brother," I said. "You saw it. You joked about it. And you never said a word." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's amazing," I continued, "how easy it is for all of you to ask for maturity now that your lies are out in the open. But where was that call for maturity when you watched someone you claimed to care about being deceived? Where was that evolved mindset when you enabled it, hid it, protected it?" Malia took a deep breath. "We were trying not to interfere. It wasn't our place." "No," I said. "What you were trying to do was preserve your comfort. Your brunches. Your jokes. Your superiority. You thought I was just a man too soft to notice." I walked to the end of the room and picked up the last glass of champagne from the untouched dessert cart. "Well, this is me noticing." I held the glass up and looked at the group. My wife, my former best friend, my brother, and the chorus of cowards who cheered them on. "A toast," I said, "to maturity. Not the kind you weaponize to silence someone. The kind that allows a man to walk through fire without screaming." I raised the glass. "To peace bought with pain." To silence used wisely. To clarity earned the hard way. They didn't raise their glasses. No one toasted with me. I drank alone. And it tasted like freedom. The room hadn't recovered. The chairs had shifted, the air was thick, and the candles that once gave everything a golden warmth now felt too bright, too accusing. Rhea still hadn't spoken again. Her fingers hovered over the last page of the envelope, as if turning it would undo it all. Troy sat with both elbows on the table, eyes glassy, face slack, staring through his ruined future. Malia had backed up to the far corner, fuming silently. And Joelle? She looked like she was rehearsing a speech in her head that she'd never get to deliver. I remained standing, my fingers brushing the rim of my glass. The quiet between us stretched so wide I could hear the soft hum of the restaurant's ambient music again. String quartets, so polite, so unaware of the battlefield they were soundtracking. Then I raised my glass again. To honesty, I said, my voice cutting clean through the air. The kind no one at this table thought I deserved. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed and stayed. Malia muttered something under her breath, something about humiliation, something about cruelty. But I didn't flinch. I wasn't cruel. I had just given back what I had received, stripped of the softness, the silence, the pretenses they were so used to hiding behind. I hadn't humiliated them. They'd done that themselves. I just held up the mirror. Troy leaned forward. You've made your point. Loud and clear. No, I said, setting my glass down. Not quite. I turned to Rhea. You married me. You made vows. You built a life with me. And then you built a second life around me with him. She looked up at me. Her eyes weren't red from crying. They were just tired. Like maybe now she was feeling the weight of everything I had been carrying for months. You want to talk? I said, voice steady. Fine. Let's talk. But not about love. Let's talk about leverage. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the second folder. This one was navy blue, thicker than the others. I placed it in front of her like a final judgment. The table tensed again. She didn't reach for it right away. What's that? Troy asked, voice cautious. A gift, I said. For Rhea. She finally opened it. And as she read, the composure she had clung to all evening began to peel off her face. These are bank documents, she said slowly. Yes. From the small business line of credit tied to the boutique you opened in Troy's neighborhood. The one you told me was backed by a silent investor. Her lips parted, but no sound came. I continued, you used my credentials. My name. My business equity. You forged the application, Rhea. You and Troy both signed it as executive co-applicants. Fraud. On record. Troy blurted, that's a lie. No, it's a PDF, I said flatly. Signed, time-stamped, and submitted from your shared IP address. Verified by the bank. Also admissible. Joelle slammed her hand on the table. You're out of your mind. You're tearing everything down. I didn't tear anything down, I said. I just stopped pretending the house wasn't already on fire. Rhea looked at me then, really looked, her voice cracking. I thought. I didn't think you'd find out like this. No, I said. You thought I wouldn't matter enough to check. You thought my love would be your insurance policy. You thought I'd always play the mature husband, the easy out, the man too afraid of confrontation to ever raise his voice. Troy stood up. You should be careful what you're implying. I turned to him, calm as ever. And you should be careful what you sign. For a moment, no one moved. Then I looked at Drew, my brother, who had sat silent the entire time, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I hadn't forgotten him. I couldn't. You knew too, didn't you? His eyes darted up, guilt bleeding out of them before his mouth could catch up. I didn't want to believe it, he said finally. I laughed, dry and low. But you did. You made that little comment at the rooftop bar, Troy and Rhea really click, remember? He looked down. I'm sorry, Marcus. No, I said, shaking my head. You're sorry you're sitting here now. You're sorry I knew how to hold my silence until it was useful. I picked up my glass again. One last toast, I said. No one objected. They couldn't. The weight of the night had made them powerless, voiceless. To every person who thought loyalty was weakness. To every friend who watched me walk blind and said nothing. To every family member who chose comfort over truth. And to every spouse who confuses love with ownership. I looked at Rhea, and for the first time in a long time, I felt absolutely nothing. Cheers. I sipped slowly. Let it settle on my tongue. It tasted sharp. Clean. Final. When I set the glass down, I turned to Noelle, still standing in the corner, silent witness to everything. "It's time," I said. He nodded once, pulled his phone out, and hit send. From every envelope on the table, a vibration buzzed. Phone's lighting up. Rhea picked hers up first, unlocking it with a trembling thumb. Her eyes widened. "You didn't." "I did," I said simply. "Everything you just saw tonight. It's backed up and sent. To my attorney, to the bank, to our accountant, and to a cloud server with restricted access, password protected and timestamped." Troy stepped toward me. "You think this ends with you looking like the hero? You've just made everything worse." "No," I said. "I just made it public." Rhea's voice dropped. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's my birthday," I said, smiling softly. "And this is the only thing I asked for." 3 days after the dinner, I pressed publish on the first episode of my podcast. I didn't even bother with an alias. No pseudonym. No protective layer between my voice and the world. I wanted people to know it was me. Marcus Ellison. The man they called mature, understanding, soft-spoken. The man they mistook for blind. The episode was titled simply, They All Knew. I recorded it the night after the dinner, alone in my home office. The lights were off, just my laptop screen illuminating the walls, casting a blue glow over the evidence folder on my desk. The red one. I didn't script the episode. I spoke from memory. From months of collected silence, stitched together with betrayal and disbelief. I started with the scent. The first clue. Sea salt and citrus. A man's cologne, not a yoga class. I walked listeners through how I recognized it. How I once bought it for my best friend Troy. How that same scent crept into my house, into my bed, into the creases of my wife's skin. I detailed the hotel stays, the fake names, the surveillance footage, the spa reservations. I even described how I stood in front of our mirror, trying to see what part of me made it so easy to cheat on. I wasn't passive, I said in the recording. I was patient. There's a difference. I layered in audio subtle, tasteful, never exploitative. Snippets from their hallway whispers, the low chuckles from that hallway spa mic. A few words from Rhea in her sleep, saying Troy's name like a spell. Then silence. Let the words linger. Let the world fill in the disgust on their own. The podcast wasn't rage-fueled. It was clean, clinical even. My tone was calm. Too calm, some would later say. Like I was narrating someone else's disaster. But it was mine. And telling it that way gave me ownership again. I had been erased from my own life for nearly a year. This was my voice reclaiming it. By the next morning, the episode had 22,000 plays. By the afternoon, 83,000. By nightfall, I had 500,000 downloads and a flooded inbox. Some emails were angry. People who thought I was airing dirty laundry that should have been kept folded in a drawer. Others were desperate. People who'd lived through quiet betrayals of their own, thanking me for giving words to something they hadn't dared speak aloud. The most common phrase I saw in those messages. "Thank you for telling the story so many of us couldn't." I got voice notes from strangers, men and women, crying. One woman said, "I left my husband the morning after I heard your voice. I knew I was sleeping beside someone who thought I'd never notice." Another said, "It didn't make it easier, but it made me feel less alone." The effect was bigger than I expected, but it wasn't shocking. Truth, when spoken without apology, echoes loudly in places people try to keep quiet. Then the text started. First from Rhea. She didn't call. She knew better. It was a string of messages. "Rhea, I listened to your podcast. Rhea, you're twisting things. Rhea, we should have talked. This wasn't fair. Rhea, please, Marcus. This doesn't have to get worse." Then Troy. His tone was predictably different. "Troy, bro. Come on. This isn't the way. Troy, you're making us look like villains. Troy, I'll talk. We can work this out." Funny how the people who were so bold in betrayal became so desperate in exposure. Then Joelle. She skipped pretense and went straight for venom. "Joelle, you made this worse than it had to be. Joelle, you're vindictive. Joelle, enjoy your 15 minutes. I didn't reply to any of them. Because I wasn't looking for their input anymore. I wasn't interested in their redemption arc. They had orchestrated my humiliation in private. I delivered the truth in public. And that wasn't the end. I had already recorded episode 2. It was uploading quietly in the background while I sorted through the legal responses. My divorce attorney had received a flurry of communications. Rhea's legal team had suddenly decided to get serious. They wanted to discuss terms after months of gaslighting and smirking like I was a harmless accessory in my own marriage. But now they were careful, measured. They knew I had public opinion in one hand and legal ammunition in the other. I hired a digital strategist the next day to handle the podcast's growth. The emails were coming in too fast. I wasn't looking for fame, but now that the story was out, I had to manage the wave it created. People wanted interviews. Journalists, bloggers, podcasters. Even a streaming network reached out about a documentary angle. I said no to all of them for now. This wasn't about monetization. This was about voice. Mine. Unfiltered. Untouched. I still remember one particular message that stood out from the rest. It was short. Anonymous. No subject line. No signature. Just 7 words. Heard you. Believed you. Thank you, Marcus. That one hit different. Because maybe it came from someone who'd been told for too long that silence was strength, that maturity meant never fighting back. Maybe it came from someone who sat through dinners like mine and swallowed betrayal with a fork and knife. That night, I poured myself a drink, neat, no ice, and stood on the balcony of my condo. The city buzzed below, lights blinking like tiny truths and windows too far to reach. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel broken either. I just felt steady. The world knew now. Not the details of my heartbreak. Not the color of my linens or the name of my boutique-destroying spouse. But the shape of it. The rhythm of betrayal. The way it sneaks in wearing cologne you once gave a friend as a gift. I sipped slowly, letting the moment sit in my chest. Behind me, my laptop pinged the second episode finished uploading. I didn't check the stats. I didn't need to. I just turned back to the night and whispered, "Say my name now." Ria showed up at my office unannounced. No call. No appointment. Just a knock on the frosted glass and the slow creak of the door opening with the kind of cautious hesitation you only see in people who already know they've lost. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her clothes were plain, gray sweater, black jeans, no jewelry, no perfume. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked like someone who had been trying to cry for hours but hadn't quite gotten there. Her hand shook slightly, fingers wrapped around a folded letter she clearly didn't want to hand over. I didn't invite her in. She stood at the threshold, searching my face for something kindness, softness, and opening. She found none. "Please," she said finally, her voice raw, stripped of its usual polish. "Can we talk?" I didn't move from behind my desk. I just looked at her. "You want to talk now?" I said. After the silence, the lies, the sleeping next to me like I was a placeholder. Her throat bobbed, but no words came. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice low but steady. "And you gave me secrets, whispers in your sleep, a boutique funded with my signature forged across the bottom line. You turned me into a fool in front of people I once called family. You made our home into a set for someone else's fantasy." "I didn't know how to stop," she whispered. "Yeah," I said, "because you didn't want to." She looked at the floor, then stepped further into the room without permission. Her arms folded around herself, protective. She placed the letter on the edge of my desk, hands shaking. "I wrote everything," she said. I couldn't say it out loud. I stared at the envelope for a long beat before dragging it slowly across the desk and dropping it directly into the shredder beside me. I didn't break eye contact. The machine hummed, swallowed her apology inch by inch until there was nothing but paper teeth and silence. She flinched like it was a slap. "I deserved that," she said softly. I stood. Not because I wanted to intimidate her, but because I refused to stay seated while she stood in the space where I rebuilt myself. "You don't get to offer closure, Ria. You don't own that. Not after spending a year writing a version of our story where I was just a supporting character." "I'm sorry," she choked out. "No," I said. "You're uncomfortable. There's a difference." The weight of my own words hit harder than expected, but I didn't let it show. I was too far gone to soften now. Too far from the man who used to wait at the kitchen table with her favorite tea, wondering if love was supposed to feel so quiet. "You made a choice," I continued, "over and over. And you weren't alone. You were surrounded by people who clapped for you while you did it." "I miss you," she said. I tilted my head. "No, Ria. You miss who I used to be. The man who gave you room to lie, who never raised his voice, who still asked how your day was while your phone buzzed with his name." She sank into the nearest chair, defeated. "I lost everything." "No," I corrected. "You gambled everything. And the house won." A long silence followed. Not the kind that begged to be filled, but the kind that meant the conversation was already over. Eventually, she stood again, slowly, as if each movement carried the weight of memory. "I hope one day you can forgive me," she said quietly. I didn't answer. She waited a moment longer. Then she walked out. This time, I let the door close fully behind her. That night, I took the long way home. I passed by the bookstore where we first bumped into each other. She was holding a worn copy of Beloved, and I was browsing through legal thrillers like they held secrets I didn't already know. We'd laughed about how different we were, how she needed poetry and I needed logic. I used to think that difference balanced us. Now I know it blinded me. I ended up in the park, the same one where I first asked her to be mine. Back then, she wore red lipstick and a wool coat that swallowed her frame, and she smiled at me like I was the answer to a question she'd been asking her whole life. I remember her hand in mine, cold but sure. I remember the way I stammered through the question, and the way she said, yes, before I finished it. I sat on the same bench that night. No one around. Just the rustling of trees and the sound of a distant saxophone drifting from someone's open window. The park looked the same. But the version of me who sat on that bench years ago? He was gone. He had been erased by betrayal, but rebuilt by truth. It didn't hurt anymore. Not like it used to. It just felt distant. Like a dream I woke up from too late to fix, but early enough to survive. I went home, opened my laptop, uploaded episode 2. The title was simple: Forgiveness is not the goal. It began with my voice, calm and unshaken. You don't owe forgiveness to the people who watched you bleed and handed you a towel just to look helpful. I talked about accountability, about how people mistake endurance for agreement, about how love isn't proven by how much you tolerate, but by how clearly you draw the line. I didn't mention Ria by name in this one. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about the millions of people who kept their pain quiet because they were told not to ruin the image of love. Because they were told to be mature, be chill, be less dramatic. I didn't want to be less anything anymore. The episode ended with one sentence. Closure isn't quiet. It's loud enough that your soul finally hears you again. It was the truest thing I'd ever said. The next morning, I woke up to another wave of emails and messages. But one stood out. It was from Drew. Drew, I was a coward. I knew. I should have said something. You didn't deserve that. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, just for a chance to start again, brother to brother. I stared at the screen for a long while before typing back. Me, I don't hate you, but I can't trust you yet. That takes time. We'll see. It was honest, not vengeful, just measured. Later that day, my attorney called. The boutique fraud charges were moving forward. The financial restitution process was beginning. Ria's lawyer had proposed a quiet settlement. I declined, not because I wanted to drag her, but because I wanted it recorded. All of it. On paper. With signatures. No more private sins. As the week ended, I recorded a teaser for episode 3. It was called The Lie Beneath the Apology. It wasn't personal anymore. It was systemic, cultural. A conversation about how people manipulate the language of healing to avoid responsibility. About how apologies are sometimes weapons dressed as olive branches. About how some people will cry only when you stop listening. That evening, I cooked dinner alone. Steak, medium rare. Garlic butter. Asparagus just slightly charred. I ate on my balcony, watching the city breathe beneath me. I used to hate being alone at meals. Now, it felt like peace. Not the empty kind. The earned kind. My phone buzzed again. A notification from the podcast dashboard. Episode 2 had just passed 1 million downloads. I set the phone down and looked at the night sky. No fireworks. No sudden joy. Just the quiet knowing that I had survived what was meant to shatter me. And as I cleared the dishes, I whispered to myself, "Happy birthday, Marcus." Then I smiled. You're free now.